Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I want to say at the outset, this is an important conversation, but one we should tread lightly on. Our allies who rely on U.S. defense assurances are watching, and if we create doubt in their minds about the capability or the willingness of the United States to live up to those commitments in any way, and I'm not claiming that's what anyone's doing, I think it could have repercussions that are significant, including encouraging some of them to perhaps pursue their own deterrent capability if they come to doubt our political ability and our willingness to live up to our commitments, actually making the world more dangerous, not less dangerous. I also think our adversaries are watching, and I'll get to that part in a moment, but I think if anyone out there thinks they could somehow get away with something because in politics of the United States would prevent the commander-in-chief from acting expeditiously, that could also encourage miscalculation, particularly on behalf of people that are isolated from the world, don't get a lot of information, and have never had anyone tell them they're wrong or no. And I have one person in particular in North Korea that concerns me in that regard. I don't think there's any debate about imminent attack or under attack. I think I would agree, I think we would all agree that the President of the United States has to have the capability to quickly respond if we are under attack and or under potential imminent attack. And obviously there could be some debate about it. I also think it's important for us in the context of this new posture review to know that the traditional Cold War threat of a massive exchange between the U.S. and the then Soviet Union is probably not likely in the short term. I think the likelier threats remain the use of Russia of tactical battlefield weapons to escalate in order to de-escalate a battlefield event, a terrorist organization that comes into possession of a nuclear device or some other weapon of mass destruction, and then a rogue regime that doesn't have any of these safeguards we've talked about. It's basically one guy who has a bad night and gets up and decides he wants to do something about it. So these are things that it's important to understand. I think this whole debate is about first use. And I want to touch on a topic that was first innovated during the Cold War in the context of an overwhelming conventional advantage that the Warsaw Pact had, but we also saw it operative in the first Gulf War, and that's the notion of calculated ambiguity. And I believe it served us in both, and particularly in '91 when Saddam Hussein was perhaps tempted to use biological and or chemical weapons. One of the reasons why perhaps he did not pursue it was that there was calculated ambiguity about whether or not that would trigger a U.S. nuclear response. And I think we could all foresee what that conflict would have looked like had he deployed biological and or chemical agents that he had in his possession, could potentially have used. Is calculated ambiguity still an important concept in the 21st century? The notion that adversaries should have doubt in their mind about whether or not the United States retains the right to strike first, should they either use a weapon of mass destruction and or move in a dangerous direction. Is calculated ambiguity still useful and still operative in this set of threats that we now face?
Senator, I believe that it enhances our deterrence to have some doubt in the mind of an adversary about under what conditions we would use a nuclear weapon.
Senator, I agree, and I'd go further and say that President Obama, who was no fan of nuclear weapons and who moved us back on the nuclear threat index in his 2010 nuclear posture review, nevertheless left in place calculated ambiguity in precisely these scenarios. And his rewriting of it was taken to mean we would not threaten countries who were attacking us with non-nuclear weapons, but a close reading of what he was decided left in place enough ambiguity to achieve precisely the deterrent effect you described. And that was from a president who was openly hostile to nuclear weapons.
Yes, is the answer to your question.
The last point in the 40 seconds I have left that I just wanted to touch on is this whole notion of if it's legal, you have a right, and I think we all understand what that means. You can't, if military officials ordered to go into a village full of civilians and kill everybody, that clearly violates the law that governs armed conflict. I think there's also some danger in that regard here. Now we have to be careful in how we talk about that as well. We cannot have a bunch of bunker lawyers that basically, or activists up and down the chain who decide that they're going to disobey any order that they disagree with. I mean, we can foresee where something like that could spin out of control. And ultimately, in this republic, we have elections. And one of the things that voters think about when they elect someone to the office of President of the United States is whether or not they want to entrust them with this capability. So it is good that people are aware of this issue, but I think we need to be very careful when we talk about that component of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I agree. I just want to say, I don't think you were here for my opening comments. I cannot agree more that both for our adversaries and those who are our friends, that we need to be careful in how we discuss this. We do not want any of them to fear that somehow the ability to make decisions that benefit our country and them, or disbenefit them if they're acting against us, is being taken away. So I couldn't agree more.